Hi. A while back, I was talking about the book Bug Music by David Rothenberg. I mentioned that the author puts together musical ensembles specifically for accompanying the songs of insects. We've also talked in the past about how the sound we create is always part of and even imbued with the sound of the natural world. I wanted to explore this idea a little further. So here is French Broad River Park in Asheville, North Carolina. It's been the usual setting for Modular on the Spot Asheville for a few years now. In fact, we had a picnic there just the other week. As our friend Cry Samadhi started to play, as swells of sound began filling the midsummer air, in a tree above me, a cicada started singing along. Well, I guess it probably wasn't actually singing along, just doing its thing. If anything, Cry was playing along to the cicada. One way or another, I was struck by what seemed like perfect timing of the cicada's crescendo each time it came back around and how well it fit into the structure of Cry's piece. I wasn't filming or recording during the picnic, unfortunately, but luckily Cry did record a version of the piece and put it up on Bandcamp. So the other day, I figured I could come back over to the park and record a cicada and sort of reconstruct the experience by overlaying it with Cry's recording of his patch. Unfortunately, right as I was about to head over, I'm not really equipped to shoot video in the rain. So I went back the next day. But sadly, I was not able to find a cicada singing anywhere in the park. I did hear a train go by. I stopped a while to listen to a branch stuck in the river. Still no cicadas. I had to give up. So at this point, I really needed to figure out how to reconstruct Cry's set because I had put some time into gathering this footage and I'm working on a deadline here. I had to get something together. The following weekend, I was at home. I stepped outside and, lo and behold, I heard a cicada singing. Perfect. It was in a tree right above my backyard. So I grabbed my field recorder and set up. And here's what I heard. The neighbor, a couple doors down, was using a leaf blower. Completely dominated the sonic field. I'll be honest, I was annoyed. I looked over at their yard and was thinking to myself, there aren't even that many leaves on the ground. It's the middle of summer. They were taking aim at each individual leaf, blowing them down the hill into their neighbor's yard just a few feet from their own. The next light breeze would blow them right back in, right? Did they really need to have a yard completely free of extraneous leaves? Surely you get diminishing returns from attacking every single leaf. Finally, after many minutes of waiting, I heard them turn off the leaf blower and go back inside. I kept my recorder rolling, and here's what I heard. A lawnmower in the distance, cars, airplanes, birds, practically everything except cicadas. Eventually, I did hear a cicada, not as clearly as I was hoping, but it was audible in among all that other racket. In the book, Treatise on Musical Objects, our old friend Pierre Schaeffer writes an intriguing passage on what he calls the Universal Symphony. We find it quite natural in an immense hubbub to hear one thing rather than another. But this implies two preconditions: that we can identify a particular sound source by attributing various sound effects to it, and that we can isolate it by putting other sounds aside. This natural listening is the least passive possible. A little later, he suggests an exercise. We will again imagine ourselves in the tumult of an amusement park, in a fairground or a packed meeting, chattering near a flight of birds beside the sea, amid the rustling of the trees in the wind. Our ear, much more musicianly than we would dare to think, does much more than identify these sound objects which it names as separate units. In its own way, it makes a true score, creating each instrument's part and giving it its continuum. So here's the thing. On the day of that modular on the spot when Cry was playing his piece, there were surely cars parking, dogs barking, trains going by, people talking. I focused on the music and the cicadas, and that's what I heard. If I had recorded it, I would be hearing all those other sounds just as clearly as I heard the cicadas that day, maybe more so. When it comes to documenting a spontaneous happening, trying to excise every single unwanted sound wouldn't be that different from trying to remove every last errant leaf from my yard. The closer I'd get to the goal, the more annoyed I'd be by what remained. And even if I were to succeed in somehow only capturing those exact, precise sounds that I had desired, I'd be losing something of the truth of the experience. The truth is that the sound of Cry playing with the cicadas that day existed only in my own ears, and now only in my own memory. But let's listen to a little bit of Cry's set, and a little of the cicada from my yard on a different day, complete with the birds and planes and lawnmowers too, because sound doesn't exist in a vacuum. We can throw up walls and say no, or we can listen and say yes. Thanks Cry Samadhi for letting us use the patch in this video. You can also find the recording at Bandcamp using the link in the video description. Now I know what you're thinking. Can we please make a patch here? Well, we've been talking about unwanted sound, so let's take a minute to focus on the most unwanted sound of all: noise. Here's a noise patch that I contributed to the Strega patch corner in the manual. The goal here was to have some easily sculptable noise that I could play with the touch agitators and gates. It's created by manually patching feedback in Strega, but instead of feeding the result back into the external input, I fed it to the volt per octave input, meaning that the output is modulating the pitch. And then we modulate time with the triangle output. Notice that when blend is turned down, this type of modulation is periodic, and it does not sound like noise. It's not until the echo verb is added to this feedback modulation that it begins to destabilize and turn into a noise patch. We can play it with the agitators, but also with just about any of the controls. I find this to be a fun noise patch on its own, and it could also be shaped further with VCAs or filters in a modular system. Another artist whose work I've been checking out is David Dunn, whose piece Chaos and the Emergent Mind of the Pond is made from recordings of aquatic insects. It's a sort of sound collage that Dunn constructed from various recordings, but it's easy to hear the many complex rhythms of the animal world shining through and interacting with each other. On release, it was paired with a suite of pieces for computer-processed speaking voices, reciting classic alchemical texts, a list of the supposed names of 49 different angels, which are then broken into pieces and reassembled. The two pieces are paired together on the album Angels and Insects, which was just recently reissued digitally on Bandcamp. I found that the computer angel human voice made an interesting foil for the insect sounds. We might pose angels and insects as somehow at extreme ends of categorization for what we call life or intelligence or emotion. But there's a lot of common ground in the two pieces, and it helps to remind that the human may well equally be close to both. One way or another, I do recommend checking out this release, Angels and Insects by David Dunn. Thanks for watching, and happy patching.